Okay, we are now live.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to our session on websites with our colleagues from National History Day, New England states. And as we're excited to have all of you here with us today and have a chance to have Elaine from the national office walk us through creating a website page, which I think will be really helpful to everyone. And also she's got exciting news to share about updates and lots of good things happening. We know websites continue to be a really popular category, so we're excited to have a chance to meet with all of you and to share information. There will be obviously a time for questions that we're going to have, and so we invite you to share those questions in the chat. I think to get started, and I should say that we kind of have two parts to today's program. We'll start off with Elaine, and then I'm going to transfer over to my co-host John Taylor from Maine. And John, you want to say a couple words of what you'll be covering in the second part of this morning's session?
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca. Yes, later on in this session, Joe Schmidt from the Maine Department of Education will be joining us to talk about judging websites. He is a long time been a part of NHD, especially in the judging ranks, and he always picks websites. And so I asked him to come on and talk about his thoughts on what judges are looking for and best practices on building websites. And so he'll be joining us right after Elaine. We'll just have a smooth transition from one to the other around 11 o'clock. So.
Great, thanks, John. To get started, I'd like to ask my colleagues to go ahead and introduce themselves. And I know Kate's going to share with us some rules for webinars and participation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elyssa Tardif. I am co-coordinator with Kate for the Massachusetts contest and also the Director of Education at the Massachusetts Historical Society.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Hunter. I'm the Education Outreach Manager at the Rhode Island Historical Society, and I'm the coordinator for Rhode Island History Day. John, I'll send it to you.
Okay. I just spoke, but I'm the state coordinator from National History Day in Maine. My name is John Taylor, and I'm also work for the Margaret Chase Smith Library, which is a congressional library here in Maine, and I'm the museum assistant there.
Let's go to Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Melchior. I also work with Elyssa at the Massachusetts Historical Society. I'm the Assistant Director of Education and am co-coordinator of the Massachusetts History Day contest. And is this a good time? Looks like we've got a good number of folks who've dropped in. Should I go over how we're using Zoom today?
That'd be great. Thank you.
So just going to do a quick reminder. I am sure that all of you are up to your ears in Zoom and are very used to it. But for anyone who's not necessarily used to the webinar format, I just wanted to run through how you'll be able to ask questions today. So basically, if you look on your screen at the bottom of the screen, you should see two chat bubbles together labeled Q&A. If you have questions at any point during the program, drop your questions into that Q&A section, and we have Sam who's going to be on them, and we'll bring them up both during the program or afterwards, depending on kind of the content of the question, to make sure that Elaine's able to work on answering those. The other thing that you can access at the bottom, there's another chat bubble that says chat. And feel free, this is a space where we can all chat with each other. If you have ideas that pop up or recommendations or suggestions, or just want to talk with your kind of other New England teacher cohort, you can do so in the chat. And if anybody drops a question in there, we'll also keep an eye on that and bring it up for Elaine to answer. And then, as we mentioned before, we are recording this. This session will be made available to everybody after all of the webinars are over, along with any other materials that we look at.
Great. Thank you, Kate. I'm Rebecca Taber-Conover. I'm the Connecticut coordinator for History Day, and I work at the Connecticut Democracy Center at Connecticut's Old State House here in Hartford, Connecticut. And I just want to thank my other New England colleagues for being here and putting so much work into this series of programs. It's really my delight to introduce Elaine Koontz this morning, because Elaine is, for all of those who are coordinators, a lifesaver who we often reach out to, and she replies with good humor and patience as someone who is not technologically gifted. She is always there for us, and we really appreciate it. So it's fun to get to see you, since we didn't see you at Nationals. Elaine has been the IT manager for National History Day since 2012, and her major focus is on building and developing NHD Web Central, which really came to the rescue when we had to move off the previous system. As you know, NHD Web Central is NHD's new digital platform. She's put a lot of work into that, and I know we're going to learn a lot of great information this morning. And in her free time, she can be found training for triathlons, putting all of us to shame. So Elaine, welcome. We're delighted to have you with us today.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm super excited to walk you guys through building in Web Central. We've had this system for a year now, but it has grown quite a bit in the last year. So we have a lot of good stuff coming up to talk about. So excuse for the noise, there is construction out my window. If you can hear that at all, not sure, but just a heads up if it gets loud. So the first thing I want to run through are the new features and what's coming soon. And I mean like end of week this soon. So the new features that we've been working on this summer, one is getting rid of a container block. So the past year, when you started a new website, you had to pull a container block into a new page every single time, and it was kind of cumbersome. So we've gotten rid of that, and the standard template that starts for every page in Web Central contains that container. And if you're new, the container block is what allows the formatting to stay in place, basically from the editor view to the public side. So when judges view it, it has a nice format. And if it's not in the container, it can get pretty messy. Just technical terms, basically. But so that's the first thing that we really worked on, is kind of standardizing the template that students come to. The second thing is we made the layout blocks easier. So in the past, we had these column blocks that allowed students to put text beside videos and videos beside images and such. So we've standardized that so that they work better. Last year, they were kind of glitchy, shall we say, but this year and moving forward, they are all easy and everything pops to the top and it's very uniform looking. So it looks really good now. We also got rid of the navigation bar, which was clunky. So now we are relying on auto nav, which is just basically any page created will be nicely laid out in an auto navigation bar. And the big thing that we just finished, I want to say last week, is iPad compatibility. So students can now log into their iPads through a browser, Chrome, Safari, whichever browser they have on their iPad or tablet. It works on Fire and Android tablets as well. So students can finally build an iPad, and that is brand new. You teachers are actually the first to hear about it. So the last thing that we are working on is themes, and we hope to have that done by the end of this week. Basically what themes will be is a color palette and fonts across all pages. So instead of a student building a page with a certain font, picking their colors, then moving to the next page and doing the same thing again, it will be standardized with, they create these pages and all the pages have a color palette and the font that they choose in the beginning. So those are the features that we have worked on over the summer and are coming soon. So the one thing that we have is the release of Web Central for this contest season. So we are implementing these seasons, we're calling them. So 2019-2020 was our last season, and this season is 2020-2021. So if students previously had websites, they will be either, if they save them, they will be put into last season, and then basically on top of that season will be this year's season and new website. So that kind of leads me into archiving. So students, since the end of contest, have been able to national contest, have been able to archive their websites for $5 a year. This cost covers the server costs to host that website. It's basically just the normal website kind of hosting model. So we know that students like to save their websites to put on their resumes, other archive and kind of like showcasing aspects of their website. So we figure $5 will cover it for the year. If they want to renew in the next year, they will receive an email asking if they would like to do so. So archiving is open. It's open through September 1st. And if they after September 1st, we have a grace period. So we know schools are starting back up. So we will have this period where kind of the stragglers or those that didn't receive our email over the summer will have a chance to save their website before starting again, or kind of keeping that website from the previous year. So that leads me into what we're coming out with in terms of guides. So in the past, we've had these pretty kind of incomplete guides, shall we say. We've tried to update them through the season. It's really hard to do when you're trying to help the students because it's a brand new system. So we really focused on recreating the guides and recreating the videos that go with those guides. So we hope to have all of those done by next week, and we hope to have Web Central open next week as well. End of this week, beginning of next week. But information regarding that will be coming out to NHE Nation soon. So that leads me, let's see, into creating a website. Is there any questions that we have coming in at all, just based on new features, guides, all of that stuff?
We don't have any questions so far, so
okay.
You're doing great.
All right, sounds good. All right, so I am going to share my screen, and we will begin with just building a home page, kind of going over the little features and such in there. So let me get that going. All right. And it looks like it's sharing. I don't think I have the chat open, so I can't see if there's any issues. Okay, thumbs up. Perfect. Cool. Sounds good.
It's good.
Cool. All right. So I'm just going to start here with basically what I was referring to earlier with the seasons. So basically, down below here, you'll see this blue bar that says the 2019-2020 website. So this is the previous season. And this was a website that we had for a demo to show group websites. Above it is this year's website. And you can start a website on an existing account, and you can have a group website. So if you were in a group last year and the student moves to an individual website, they don't have the same group members, so it'll be brand new and fresh, and they can start either as an individual or go into a group website. So I'm just going to switch over to a new website. So if a student comes in and they are building their first website ever, this is what their landing page will look like. It's just going to be one box with this year's website. So we're going to go in and we're going to edit the site. And we've sort of updated our features release, but these are basically the things that I talked about previously. So students will see this when they log in and open up the home page. All right, let me move this over. Cool. All right, so as you can see, this is the first page, and I'm not sure, okay, it does highlight. But basically this container will show up on every single page, and this is the container that will keep everything formatted very nicely and allow the judges to see it from the editor view to the public view. It'll keep everything nice and uniform. So the example website that I'm going to be using is this layout. So I'm going to try to duplicate this and just show you the different elements. And this really covers all of the elements really well. So let me jump back over here. So we'll start with pulling our elements into the container. And the first block here is a section. Sections are really helpful if the student wants to keep things organized basically down the page. So we'll start with the section and we'll put our navigation bar into this. And so basically, before I started building out this page, I did add all of the pages that I needed. So the auto nav, this is our brand new auto navigation bar. And if you double click on this, it allows you to reorganize the pages how the student wants to. So basically a nice flow from page to page that the judges can go through and look at the website. The other feature of the auto nav is subpages. So when we started out last year, we didn't have subpages, but then we finally got them with auto nav. So it's really nice that the auto navigation bar is there, and then underneath each page, the student can create subpages. So I already created those, but I did want to create one more page just to show you how that works. So there's two different ways to go into getting to the page manager, either going through the edit page dropdown, which is this manage pages button, or this little filing cabinet also brings you right to the managing pages. So I'm just going to create one new page, and this is going to be my research page. So the page name is going to be the navigation. So basically it'll be siteKey.nhdwebcentral.org / and then this page. So it'll be research or thesis, background, whatever the student wants it to be, and they can edit this later. And then this will be the title of it. So programmed to say Weebly all the time, so I apologize for that, but we are strictly Web Central now. So I will add that page, and it won't load that page. It'll load it in the background, so they can go to it and let me save this first. And go to it through their editing pages, but some students get confused because they're like, I created my new page and it didn't go to it, but it stays on the page, it just created it in the background. So let's go back to our home page. Okay, so we have our navigation bar, and there are different kind of justifications that this has. This one is specifically done because it is an element. The justification is done under the flex settings. So we'll enable it, and then we will move these over to the left, right, center, all that, wherever we want it. So I'm going to leave it there. So then we'll go back to our blocks, and we have a section here, and I'd like to keep my navigation bar away from the other elements. So I'm going to bring another section block in here, and that's going to hold kind of my header. So I'm going to drag my image in here, and this is the file manager. Basically, this is where all of the images, documents, videos, audio files will live. And because we are picking a picture, all of the elements showing up right now are images. So I'm going to take this header and I'm going to bring that in. And I like that it's across the page this way, but I want to make it a little bigger. So you'll see I'm selected on it, and it has these nice little adjuster buttons. So I'll pull that over, and I'm going to make it basically a header across the whole thing. So then I also know that it's not centered. So easily I can select the image, and then this up arrow will allow me to select that section that I pulled in earlier. And that is what's going to help us adjust our elements with inside that section. So if I go to font and then I center align under text, so you'll see this is different alignment than the other one. So this one is the box is containing our elements. So we want to align it with the font adjustment. Whereas the previous one that we had was the flex, because it's an element by itself. We use the flex settings. It's a little confusing. We do have it laid out nicely in our guides, but if it's an element by itself, it will be under the flex. So embed items, auto nav, and video audio with PDFs as well. Those will be the flex, and anything that we move in our section, images, text, will be under the font alignment. Okay, so we have a nice header here, and I also want to put some text underneath of it. So I'm going to take a text box. There's a bunch of different settings and types of font, headers, subtitles, and such. So I just want text underneath of it that I can manipulate. So I'm going to drag this in, and I'm going to make sure that it's also underneath of my header image. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to pull the text from my other demo. So I'm going to pull this in. And we're going to see that it's there. So of course it's contained in it. So I'm going to align my text, and I'm going to change the font. The font's really nice because they can bring in hex numbers, they can bring in RGB numbers, but they can also just type in words of colors. So I'm just going to say that I want this white, and I can't see it. So that means I have to change the background of my website. So if I just click outside of the container, you'll see this little body text label come up. So I will pull that, I will pull down this, and I do have the color that I want. So the hex number of that color, so I can just pull that, paste it, and it's going to make my background nice and gray. So go back to this. Let's make this font a little bigger. Font size, they can do different types of small, medium, large. Also can do different font sizes, and you can also drag it up and down to make it big and small, however you feel fit. So we'll do that. We'll also make it bold, because this is the title of our website. And I also want it to stand out from the background. So if we close font and go down to decoration, we'll have this background color option. So let's go ahead and pull this blue color. It'll make it pop really nice. And there we go. All right, and looks like I also want maybe the auto nav to be the same color. So if I just go back here, I can change this. Also maybe want a different font as well. So I'll put this here, and that'll be nice. That'll look good. So, and we will save. So the save button is not automatic. The students do have to hit save when they make changes. So we do provide 2 different save buttons wherever they feel necessary to click, but there are 2 options, and save often is always our motto. So let's see what else we have next. We have an image with some text beside it. So this will really hit our easy layout columns that I talked about earlier. So if I go back, then I can bring another section in because I like my header here and I want to make a new section underneath of it that's kind of separate from these two elements. And I make sure it's in my container. So I'm also going to drag a text box in here, and I'm also going to bring my columns in. So we kind of saw what the text box looks like. So I just want to bring in my columns. So you'll see we have two separate boxes, and you can bring any element you want into those columns. Let's go ahead and bring an image in here, and we brought the image in, so it's going to say, hey, what image do you want to bring in? So we'll scroll down. I know I want this one. And I also want some text in this side. So I'll go back here, copy my text, just to make it a little easier. Sorry, the Zoom bar keeps coming up at the top. So text that, and then we'll go, and I want to make this white to match. Make it a little uniform. I know there was text in here, but I'm just going to make it white and center it so it's different. And look, I need a caption on my image. So I made a mistake. I really don't want the image. I want the image and caption element. So if I delete this, I can go back to my blocks and I can see image, but I also see image and caption. So I want that instead. So I'll click that, bring my image in, and I also want to bring my caption in. So copy that. And make this white. Okay, that looks good. So we'll save that. And then the last element that I want to show you guys is the hyperlink blocks and the multimedia. So we will go through those two things here. So again, I want to keep that separate. So I'll bring another section in below my columns. So there's my section. And I want to bring in another 2 columns to have my hyperlink separate from the text, basically my title page information. So I'll bring the text in this way, and let's see. Okay, so there's 2 different link blocks that we have. The link block is going to give you a button, so a student can put an image in there if they want to make that their hyperlink. But for this example, we're going to just use the link text, which is going to make the text a hyperlink. So we're going to pull that into the right side, and we're going to change the font. I'm pretty sure that one was the brush script, and we're going to make it bigger because that's just too small. Okay, and so to change the font color on this, we're going to have to hyperlink it first. So I want this to go to my background page. So we're going to save that. And it's pink. I don't really want it pink. I want it kind of an orange color. So like I said, you can put hex numbers in there and also just the words. But there's also a really nice spectrum in here that we can kind of scroll through and pick the color on what we want. So I kind of want that a brown. Or gold. Let's see. That's looking pretty good. So we'll do that, and that is hyperlinked. See when we scroll over it. So I'll save that, and I'm also going to bring the information over of what kind of website I've got going here. Oops. And don't throw it out of your container. And of course, we're going to change this to white to keep it all uniform. And this, I think I want it to be more centered, so we'll do that. This looks pretty good. All right, the last element I want to go over is the embed. So let's go ahead and make another section. There we go. And then I'm going to bring my embed element, embed multimedia. So this element is my absolute favorite. Basically, you can put PDFs in here, videos, or audio. So if I double click on this, it will bring up all of the elements on my page in my website that are PDFs, audio files, and videos. So just to show an example, I'm going to click on my bibliography, and you can see in the background it's loading it. So it will load as a PDF very nicely in the background. These two items usually go on our research pages, so actually I want to have an audio file. So I think the home song will work nicely. So if I close that, and you'll see this is kind of big, we can change the dimensions in the dimension area. So if we go to height, I want this to be 100. It'll kind of squish it all together and make it really nice. So let's go ahead and save that. And then, like I said, see, these font things don't work because this is an element itself. So we want to click on this and, whoops, let me go one up. And then I'm going to enable this to be centered. So, and that's under the flex area. So we basically have that, and let's go ahead and give credit to that. And I think we will be good to go with our home page. I know there's a few other elements, but if you have questions, I'm happy to show you how those work. Let's go ahead and get, actually I want this to be a subtitle. It's a little smaller. And if I do it right here, that's really big. Let's go ahead and bring that down. Center it, make it white. And looks like we're good to go. All right, and so after we save it, we can preview it, see what it looks like without all of these guides around it. So let's go ahead and click on the eyeball. It will open in a new page, and here's the page that we just built. And everything will go to blank pages because I didn't build those out, but our navigation bar works, and I do believe our audio will work. Yep, perfect. All right, any questions as we've gone through this?
All right, so as a reminder to everybody, please feel free to type your questions into the chat. We do have two I want to go over while we're letting folks type other things in.
Absolutely.
First, I typed in, but just so everybody knows that this is available, Christine asked, will the guides be free to students, the guides about using Web Central? So I said yes, and they're on the website. Elaine, if you want to tell us where exactly on the website they live, that would be great.
Absolutely. All of the guides that are currently there are at nhd.org/NHD Web Central. So everything will be replaced basically there. So we have guides, we have videos, and we also have an FAQ section that we update regularly as questions come in. So that's where everything can be found, and we will be posting that out everywhere.
Perfect. And then Jay typed in, how do you ensure the images, MP3s, etc. are going to show up when published? Several students had issues where they put images into their sites, but they didn't always show up when published.
Got it. So this is a thing that students were confused about last year. So basically, we have this area up here called Manage Files. So if they click on this, and students started deleting things out of here last year. So they had their images, they had their PDFs, and they were like, oh, my website's too big, I'm going to start deleting things. And they thought that the images would still show up, but it turned out that when they saved it and then when they went to preview, it was caching it. So now, if they delete things out of the file viewer and then they try to publish it, it will come up with missing images and show that to them. So as always, just keep those files in the manage folder and don't delete them. They have to live in there to be shown on the public side.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we don't have any other questions at the moment. Can I follow up with something you just said, Elaine?
Sure.
So if students are finding that their website's too big, what tips do you have then to kind of work through that and keep it within size but not delete the images that they need?
Absolutely. So the biggest offender of large websites are the images. Video can be as well. Most video files that come off of different pages, websites and such, can be pretty little. But big images, like really high quality images, the best solution to that is taking a screenshot of the image. And it won't take any of the kind of resolution away. It will keep it pretty much the same, but just screenshotting it and then uploading it will make it a lot tinier.
That's a great tip. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? You're just so thorough, Elaine. You covered it all.
Elaine, can you maybe discuss a little bit about what were some of the more confusing elements to students this past year that you got the most questions about?
Absolutely. So navigation was a big one because we didn't really have one, but we came out with AutoNav. So we think that has really streamlined how to create a really nice navigation bar. The other thing was the file manager issue where students were starting to delete things and then they weren't showing up. The alignment was a big thing, but we've kind of fixed that as well. So a lot of the issues that we had last year, we've kind of gone back and tried to streamline or fix them. So hopefully there's not as many issues this year. There will definitely be questions and we're definitely open for anything. But I think a lot of the issues that we really ran into have been resolved.
So,
Just to follow up on the AutoNav question, I was wondering if you could demonstrate for us how, if they wanted to add that research page that you created to that AutoNav at the top of the website, what they would do for that.
Yeah, sorry about that. So if you double click in here, you'll see that the new page was buried under this extra kind of pages section. Some students like to make pages that are kind of templates for different things, and then they'll throw it into this subsection. So if you take the research there, you'll see kind of behind it these lines that appear. So the green line means that it's going to create it. If you pull it out here a little bit, there we go. So it's going to pull it out of that subsection, but then the pink line is going to make it a sub page. If I can grab it. So we're going to move it under legacy just for fun. Okay, it moved to deactivation. So if we pull that out, it's a little finicky, but we can pull that out, and this is just a extra piece. It's actually not even linked to a website. So we'll remove that and we will save it. So if we close, we can now see that research is out here by itself. Away from that subsection that was hidden.
Thank you.
Oh, actually I have two of them because there was an extra one. There we go.
Boop. All right. We have another question. When a student signs up for an account and is working with a group, do all members need accounts?
Yes, all students need their own account, and then we will start with what we're calling student one. So student one will create their website. So they will see this page when they sign up, and student one will need to allow the other students to link to that. So they will click this allow link button, and this will allow the other students to sign up, register for an account, and then student one gives them the site key. And there will be a section in that in their landing page when they first sign up that says start now on an individual student or a group website. So there will be a field and they will have to enter this site key and it will link them to it. So if we go back to my previous website, you'll see there were 2 students on that site and we used the site key to get both of them on there.
Fantastic, thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Elaine, what are some of your favorite features so far on this site?
So like I said, the Embed multimedia is my absolute favorite because it's so complex but so simple for the user. Because in Weebly, we had different elements for PDFs, we had different elements for audio, video, whereas we kind of simplified it and smushed them all together, and that Embed multimedia will pick up any kind of PDF, video, audio that you put into it, and you can really manipulate it from there. AutoNav's my other second favorite because it's so simple. And the third is probably the themes that we're working on. So you saw like I had to change the font and I had to change the color for all the different elements, whereas the theme that's coming out soon will have that already in place. So those are probably my top 3.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Elaine, if folks think of questions later, where can they direct those to?
They can email me at it@nhd.org.
Perfect.
Is there anywhere that the students or teachers can look for some really good examples that have been created on this platform?
So we do have a project examples page on our website, nhd.org. And I believe it's under either the student section or the teacher section. We have a project examples. So we haven't built it out quite yet for the previous contest season, but we will be pulling those in and displaying those in that section on our website.
On that note, I will also make a plug for this afternoon session. At 1 o'clock today, we'll have a student, Lily Trunzo. Lily won the Senior Division Outstanding Award for Rhode Island for the website that she built on Web Central this past year at Nationals. So that will be an example of a student website you can all look at.
Yeah, and I'd like to just say that, after the contract ended with Weebly, which was kind of unexpected, I want to commend the national staff, and especially you, Elaine, working with the website builder on working through and getting this taken care of and created so students can still build websites. Of course, we all know there were some bugs along the way, and we were trying to get everything worked out together. But I love that it's coming together more and more each time we take a look at this. You pointed out some things that are some new aspects of it that have by the end of the week will be available for students and teachers. Is there anything else down the line that you are still currently working on?
Not at the moment. There's some bugs and fixes as always, but the big things are the iPad compatibility and the themes. So those were kind of the last 2 things for the summer, and we'll just see where we go from there, really.
Well, it's been very impressive to see this thing grow and how quickly you guys have been able to do it. So thank you a lot for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine.
No problem.
Do you have any final questions before we let Elaine get to her Tuesday?
It looks like no other questions. We have a few minutes until Joe will be signing on.
I think he's here.
Oh, is he?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I'm getting some messages saying, thank you, Elaine, and people just want to rewatch the video later.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's been incredibly helpful.
Wonderful. That's great. Yeah, I'm really excited to release the guides and everything because the guides have the videos kind of embedded in them. So the PDF version they can open and then they can click on all of the icons that we have for the videos. And the videos are very in-depth. So we've really redone it and restructured it to make it a lot easier, we hope.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Elaine.
Oh, no problem.
Oh, and then we have someone else saying thank you.
All right, I'll stop sharing my screen as well.
All right. John, are you taking over now?
Sure, we'll do one last call if there's any other questions for Elaine. And then again, as Sam said, we'll let her get to her Tuesday. So if there is none.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to our next speaker for the session then. Thank you, Elaine, again.
Thank you, Elaine. And I want to say a shout out that, Elaine, you were incredibly fast when it came to answering questions for our students this year. I don't know how you did it, but you were really amazing. So thank you for being the resource that you are.
No problem. Happy to help.
Thanks, Elaine.
You're
I think
welcome.
I speak not only for the New England coordinators, but all coordinators and saying thank you for all the hard work you've done.
Definitely.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, so I think we will move on to our other speaker, who is Joe Schmidt. I see that Joe has finally has his video on now. So Joe Schmidt is the social studies guru here in Maine. He works for the Maine Department of Education. Once Joe begins talking, you'll be able to tell that Joe is from away. Joe is a fellow Midwesterner, just like myself. Joe comes from Wisconsin. How long, has it been 3 or 4 years since you moved here?
Good math problem. Right at 3.5. Closing
3.5.
exactly
Oh man,
3.5.
I'm really good. All right. So 3.5 years since you moved here, and you've definitely made an impression on all the social studies teachers here in the state. And I do mean that in a good way. We all do appreciate all the hard work that you've done, especially once COVID hit. The amount of PD and offerings that Joe was able to create for social studies teachers throughout this state has been incredible. Almost over 100 different recordings you did of different type of PD for teachers. Is that correct?
If we count what's on the my new professional learning page, there was 83 separate different speaker topic hosts, but then yes, we had dozens of other office hours and other opportunities as well. But yeah, so 83 credentialed hour opportunities.
And is that possible for other teachers throughout the region to look at that outside of Maine?
Yep, it's all on my professional learning page. I'm currently starting to work with some of my teacher leaders about how to best do credentials for those who watch it asynchronously. But yeah, everything is currently available online. I've tried to bucket them out. I think there's 15 different little mini topics. So if you're an elementary school teacher, you can go to one page. If you're looking for like civil discourse and engagement, there's another page that features speakers that were relating to those different topics.
Well, I would definitely recommend if you have some time, teachers from outside of Maine and in Maine, to take a look at what Joe has been able to put together for educators. It's very useful resources. And one of those includes yours truly here. So speaking about Margaret Chase Smith, Senator Margaret Chase Smith. But I'll get along to the topic of today. And the first thing I want to say is Joe has been a dedicated person to the NHD in Maine program. He always gives his time at every single contest, coming out and judging and helping us with running the day-to-day schedules and doing the check-ins in the morning for us and things like that. And it's always much appreciated that Joe shows up, and we're always happy to see him walk through the door on contest day to help us out with everything. Joe has been, like I said, a dedicated judge, and for some reason he always picks websites. And so I thought I would ask Joe to come on today and and discuss with teachers what judges are looking for when they're judging websites and some of the pitfalls that he sees that students might do when they're creating these projects in this category. So without further ado, I'll just pass this over to you, Joe, and let you speak.
Sure, I forgot to ask, should I go get my National History Day vest on? Would that be helpful for the recording as well?
I was actually wondering if you were going to do that today. I was 50% expecting you to wear that.
Well, I think we have participants, right? They may have not expected a little bit of a break. So everybody has 2 minutes if you need to fill up your coffee, water, juice, run to the bathroom. I will go get my vest. I will get my screen all set up, and then we can go from there. How does that sound?
Perfect. It suits you.
Get the full logo in.
There you
I
go.
wore the light blue to go with it, so.
It's perfect. I guess the one other thing I should note is that Joe is also the biggest Pearl Jam fan I know. So we'll add that to the list. But I'll pass it over to you whenever you're ready.
Are you okay if I start now? I see people's screens went blank.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me screen share then. And I see we have participants and attendees. So anybody who's in attendance, if you please, if you have any questions, please go ahead and drop into the Q&A and I can be looking in there. It's going to be just a pretty open discussion, again, trying to kind of just work through. Christina, yes! I was going to take John to his first concert. First Pearl Jam concert, but in Quebec City, but then COVID hit, so we'll still make that trip.
Someday.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yes. Again, any questions, feel free to just go ahead and drop them into either the chat box or I will monitor the Q&A as well. As John was talking earlier, and as I referenced, I've done way too many Zooms in the past 4 or 5 months. I feel very equipped on how to navigate all these tools. So please feel free to chime in. That is the purpose of this. I am by no means the end-all be-all expert on any of this. John mentioned that for some reason I continue to pick websites. I can tell you part of the reason why is I never want to have the research paper. Writing is not a passion of mine in that sense, and reading it is even less so. And then I've never been necessarily a fan of judging the exhibits. So I've always just preferred the documentaries and the websites. I can't exactly tell you why necessarily, I guess. Some of it's not wanting to do the other ones. What I think is about those pieces is there's parameters that you're working with that still allow for so much flexibility and creativity. And the challenges that students face on the website is some of the things I'll be talking about today when talking about judging. So thank you, John, for that wonderful introduction. I'm here, my name is Joe Schmidt. I'm a social studies specialist for Maine Department of Education, and I'm here today to talk about judging NHD websites. How I approach the work is I do you're going to do 3 quick reads and then a close read is how I do it. And so some of this stuff I think is so simple, manageable right off the bat that I think should never be an issue with students, yet it always is. So that first quick read that I go through and do is, does it meet the basic requirements? there are very clear expectations in terms of what's supposed to be on the homepage for websites, clear expectations about how sourcing is supposed to be done, any of the images and stuff with the credits, how that's to be done, multimedia time limits, 3 minutes. They have to be functional, they have to work. The bibliography has to be there along with containing both primary and secondary sources and how that's sorted out, and then a process paper. So the very first time I'll click on the site, I'll open it up, I'll walk through these things just knowing off the top of my head, these things need to be here. And so if the homepage doesn't have that information, I note that right away. I'm checking images for all the captions, the sourcing, I'm looking for multimedia. I'm not listening to it the first time through. What I'm doing is clicking on it and seeing what the time is. And again, so many of these things, the multimedia under 3 minutes, there'll be a video clip of just a 12-minute entire video clip sitting in there. So that's right off the bat, that's noted on the sheets. The multimedia went over, or it's missing credits or sourcing, that type of stuff. And for me, those things are pretty just straightforward and should be able to be addressed by students before, that shouldn't be a surprise, I guess is what I'm saying, as the expectations. So that's the very first thing I'll go through and look for. My second quick read, so then I go back to the beginning, and I'm skimming now, doing a little bit of reading, but not necessarily for comprehension. I'm navigating the system, I'm reading through, and I'm looking for typos or spelling errors, things I didn't see on that very first glance, because I wasn't necessarily looking into the words. And again, this time, I'm not necessarily reading it for content or analysis or synthesis. I'm just scanning through, and some of those things are going to stand out very immediately. And the other reason I do this first thing is reading through is I try to get a feel for the student's voice, because this helps spot plagiarism. Again, not trying to get into the details of the thoughts, but just how do they write? What's their structure? Is it short sentences? Is it big words? Is it whatever it is? And there have been times where students, in my experience again, that it's not necessarily students, and this probably isn't surprising, they're not going to copy paste their entire website, right? It's not going to be just an entire series of copy paste. The times where, at least I've noted and talked to students about some of this stuff, is that they've got page 1, page 2, page 3, and then on like page 4, it clearly is not their voice. It comes in formatting, becomes clear. It stands up, formatting, and again, the big time is that voice. And so, again, typos, spelling errors, that type of stuff should never show up in that final piece if you've put in some time, thought, and energy into reviewing it. I'm looking for all the navigation tools. I would say one of my biggest frustrations is just not being able to simply and clearly navigate the website. And I put a specific example. This just actually showed up in 2 of the websites that I judged for, did I have middle school this year? Middle school web pages for the Maine state level. I don't exactly know how the programming works, and it sounds like you just learned more about some of that part. But on the top, it would be like page A, B, C, and D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when I was on page 3, the top was just page 1, 2, 4, 5. And it becomes easy to lose track of where I'm supposed to be or what I was supposed to, where I just came from, what I was trying to do. And I ended up finding myself kind of looping through a couple of times, being like, wait a minute, where am I and which one is the next one? And so what I found to be super positive as an impact in the web design is the tabs at the bottom, the next, the forward and back arrows, which just help me read through a page, click to the next one, and move me to the next one. Now, I do check in looking across the top, then trying to figure out, did it actually then take me to the next one? Because there have been times, at least in the Weebly model, where there was the drop down and I could say, page 5 has subpage A, B, C, and D. and their navigation tools didn't hit all those pages. They were just going from 4 to 5 to 6, not 5A, 5B, 5C. So again, not really paying attention to all the details of it, but just trying to make sure, am I able to easily and clearly navigate all the pages that are there? Does it make sense in the tools? Or am I, and again, I can think of this one from this last spring, I felt like I ended up having to go back to the home page to see all of my options, to then go to 2, and then back to home to then find 3, because when they were all listed out, then I was able to say, okay, I just read about this one, now I need to get into this one. So again, that's something I'm doing on the second read, is just, can I navigate the system? And I think that's part of one of those things that stands out from the other pieces as that technology challenge. If the student's writing, I know I just flip the page, but I think there's so many different ways that a student can use some of those technology pieces to take me to the page and where they want to go. In my third read, now I'm starting to, again, to try to bring a lot more of those pieces in. I'm looking for the visual impact. Once I've navigated all of those pages and know where I'm going and kind of what's going to be there, I'm then looking for that visual impact. One thing that stands out, and again, to me just shouldn't happen, is a black font on a dark black and white picture background. There's great opportunities for students to have really fun pictures or appropriate images or styles, whatever, in the background. But if you have a picture that's dark and grainy, and then you're using a black font, I can't read it. I can't read the page. And there was an actual website that I reviewed this, I think it was at a regional event, where I had to do the Alt-A, select all to highlight it, to then change that background piece. When I highlighted, I was able to then read the words of it. And so at that point, I noted it right away, and I came back later on to read it. But so I'm looking for, like, so what are the images along with that font? Is it blurry? If you uploaded a video, there was one video, I think, was it this year or 2 years ago? I checked, I refreshed multiple times to make sure it wasn't something on my end. And I guess in the end, it still could have been, but I think I checked 3, 4, 5 times. Let me refresh, let me reload. The video and audio did not match up on the image, or on the multimedia, which made it very distracting, very hard to follow. And again, I don't know if that was something that they saw and knew, and they were like, okay, I mean, then that's an issue. The technology obviously could have been playing a role in it, but checking for that. Can I hear? There's ones that I remember there was one about the space race where they had Russian video, and it was spoken in Russian, and there was bits and pieces where they would have like an audio clip in Russian, and the narrator was like, you know, they're talking about XYZ, but there was also times where they didn't translate. There was not the closed captioning piece. So I'm sitting there listening to Russian, which I don't speak or understand, in segments at a time, not being able to do it again. So here's again where I'm now going through the audio a little bit and trying to hear it, trying to view everything and just pull all those pieces together. Another thing that does show up a good number of times, or probably more than it should, is layout issues. Looking for some sort of consistency, or at least understanding the design that you're going for. If one page is kind of set up this way, and then this next page, if you're changing the pages, I don't have a problem with that necessarily, but I have to know that it was intentional. And there have been times where it just looked like it was a formatting issue, where there's columns of type here, and there's an image here, off-centered, this, that. And if that had maybe been more consistent, I would say, okay, well, this must be, you know, the style they're going for. But when page 3 is completely different than page 2 and 4 and 5, and it feels like there's this weird off-centered piece that notices, that stands out. And, you know, it's one of those things that you don't want to be noticed for that piece. I'm not even reading what you're writing yet, and I'm already distracted and trying to think about what are you doing with this page. The same thing with long text sessions. Back to the idea of if it just looks like the paper, do the paper then if you want to just do out these big block sections. And it also makes me think when there's a long just text section, one of the first things I do is I kind of give it that other close read for voice, because then I'm starting to think, is this a copy paste? Was this a plagiarism piece just brought over by the student? Or did the student, who all of the other sections were writing 2 to 3 little sentence chunks appropriate with different images or multimedia and stuff like that, I now all of a sudden have a page that's just line after line after line after line. Did the student now just write like that all of a sudden? Or was that a quick, oh shoot, I'm running out of time, let me bring those pieces in? So that kind of raises one of those flags for me about why that style had changed. And again, a student could write that exact same way on every single page, but then you're defeating the purpose of the website if you're just blocking off long sets of text. Does anybody have any questions about my 3 quick reads? I will practice my wait time. Okay, if you do have questions, still feel free to jump in at any time. John, did you have a question?
Well, actually, I was just going to say thank you for pointing out, your second basic read through where you're talking about navigation and all that. That's one of the elements that I think makes this category difficult, is that as a whole, students don't see their project compared to other categories. And what I mean by that, if you lay out an exhibit, you're going to see everything. If you film your performance, you can watch it and then decide that you might need to put a scene up earlier or remove a part of the background, something like that. But it's very difficult sometimes, I think, for students to really see the whole project, because you're moving from page to page through the navigation. So is that something that you notice as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think what I heard in my head that translates for that is when it's clear, and this isn't a negative, right? This is how I would expect any student to do the project. It's a piecemeal. You're doing one section at a time. You're figuring out that piece, and that's okay. And then part of the challenge is pulling all those pieces together so that it does make sense as a coherent one. And again, that's where if I'm moving from page 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, and the background changes, the font starts to change, the layout starts to change. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it oftentimes, to me, comes across as the last second piece. This was the last thing I did. I quick threw it in, type stuff. And I remember one, I think it was a couple of years ago. They had this great background piece, right? So the background image can be helpful. It doesn't have to be a distraction. And they had worked with it really well. And background 1 or page 1, page 2, page 3, all had the same background. And then on the last one, the background disappeared, and it was just this blank generic piece, which on its own is not necessarily bad. It just stands out across that piece. And any of those things, I think what you'd want to tell students is any of those things that make me pause to think about something other than your writing, other than the content and analysis, I'm now distracted and I'm starting to wonder why this changed, why did this format change, why did the background change, why is your writing style change? And I think that just puts you in a position for me to start to look for other things. I'm trying to think of the piece you always hear in my head, right? Like there are things you never want to think about, right? Because they should just be so well done sitting in the background. But I notice the fonts when they're bad. I notice the layouts when it's an issue. I notice those type of pieces. So when done well, I'm going to subtly just realize it, but not be distracted by it. Those are the ones, as I'm doing these 3 quick reads, if I'm having to stop and be like, wait a minute, did they have the word? Wait a minute, what about this? That video clip. Now you're starting to lose the fact that the website is not now just delivering your thought and information. It's starting to impact how I'm taking in that information. And so, yeah, you're going to do it chunk by chunk, which is completely understandable. Then the task becomes to connect them all together in a clear, coherent way.
Thank you.
Other questions from anybody, or questions, thoughts, comments? And when you get into a rhythm doing it, you know, it's 3 quick reads, doing all this stuff. It really does fly by when there aren't the issues. It's the little checklist in my head, check, 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 check. It's when I start to think and move and look and be like, that doesn't make sense. So yeah, that 3 quick reads, and then the 4th, now I do a close read. Now I'm starting to do the synthesis and analysis. We're looking for student synthesis and analysis, and starting with that clear and targeted thesis. I think beyond the web design stuff that was in the first 3 quick reads, this is a place where I see students struggling a lot. I would say this is one of those things that stands out to me, is the thesis is either just this general summary statement that's not really a thesis, or oftentimes it's too big to be covered in the 1,200 words of the web page, right? Like my thesis is that the civil rights movement changed America. That's a really, really big piece. That's not a 1,200 word piece. There's so many other pieces in there. And that's where I would say I always jokingly say, anytime I'm going to go walk through the exhibit hall, I know I'm going to see Ruby Bridges. I know I'm going to see Jesse Owens. I know I'm going to see Jackie Robinson, right? Those are people who've tried to cut down that bigger thesis and done something more targeted, which is great. The flip of that then is when you start to do that targeted thesis is sometimes you start to spend too much time on building background. And again, I'm thinking about the civil rights movement. The example in my head was about Jackie Robinson. And the thesis was about Jackie Robinson specifically. And then I feel like, if I remember correctly, like half the web page was about the background of the civil rights movement, which is important, which is part of that understanding of the whole thing. But if the thesis is specific to Jackie Robinson, then you need to get to that very quickly. Like, what is that role in putting in the context? And again, there's a line. I don't think you can completely ignore it, but I think there is some understanding of the people who are reading this are going to have some basic background knowledge. Yes, there was a civil rights movement afoot. Yes, there were times where African Americans and whites were not treated equally. How much time to be spent on that probably shouldn't outweigh the stuff that's targeted right to the thesis. Because what that starts to take away from is the ability to do that thoughtful analysis and interpretation. So again, what I remember, what stands out in this example is kind of a little bit of a case study, was even when the thesis was then trying to go a little deeper into Jackie Robinson, by the time they started to run out of words and doing the full background of the civil rights movement, some of the background civil rights movement, and get into that, then the thesis ended up staying at like surface level analysis because there just wasn't enough time. There was too many little odds and ends they wanted, at least I assumed how it kind of took out of, like, instead of following down these little rabbit holes of information that would build up to that one story, they didn't have enough time for those pieces. And so that's what I really want to see in a website. When I get that thesis, I want the thesis to have me think about something in a way that I haven't done before. And again, if you can do Ruby Bridges and Jackie Robinson and Jesse Owens, just know that I've seen it a lot. And I don't want you to just retell me the story. So I put here, interpret the story instead of retelling it. Take me somewhere I haven't been. And that can be a different, even a more obscure person. There's been people, topics that have come up that I've never heard of. And it was an instant right off the bat. I'm like, okay, all right, let's see where this goes. I want to learn about this. And then it becomes a timeline of their life. which to me is not interpreting the story. It's just telling the story of person X, Y, or Z, or whatever it is. So to me, that's the same point, regardless of if it's a well-known topic that's been done a bunch of times or something I've never heard of before. Don't give me the timeline of events. Don't give me the big general overview. Give me enough of the overviews that I understand why I need to know about this, and then tell me the story. Make it interesting, make it really fascinating. There was this one about Alcatraz that I was like, okay, I'm familiar with Alcatraz. And it was the escape, the people who had allegedly escaped, but just the way that they approached in this idea of, it wasn't the escape from Alcatraz necessarily, it was the interactions of these men and how they worked together and what was the role, what was the process, and how did they do it. So it wasn't like, Alcatraz can never be escaped from. Here's the history of Alcatraz. Here's the one time, very briefly, and it's never been done again. And prisons are tough to get out from. They did a really nice job of getting into the story of these men. I didn't know the men before, and I learned a lot during it. Another thing that stands out in telling the story, and again, this kind of goes back to that piece about the block text, is when using quotes. I love quotes. Those are great. Keep them short. Keep them clear. If you give me a long quote, 3, 4, 5 sentences long, part of me thinks you're just trying to kind of get around the system a little bit in the word count to bring in more stuff. And it also makes me feel like you're not quite sure what the important quote part of that quote is. And yeah, there are longer quotes that could be important, but don't just copy paste in a big block text of that. Show me that it wasn't like, oh, well, Martin Luther King Jr., here's a quote, but what are those most impactful pieces to it? Because to me, that shows the analysis. You found this quote, a page long, a paragraph long, a speech, a long, oration from MLK, but what's that most important nugget that relates to what you're trying to do with your thesis, that relates to the story you're trying to tell me? So again, to me, that's that skill of don't just copy paste the entire thing in, even if it's an accurate quote, even if it's a quote that makes sense kind of in the context, show me that you can pull out those pieces. And if you want to do a little quote here, a little quote here, that's great. That's a great way to break things up and kind of connect different pieces of analysis is with those quotes, help connect some of the images in between. Just don't give me the real big long quote in the middle of the page. Because again, it's a little bit of a distracting, and I'm trying to wonder why you're giving me all of this, because it seems like that's just way easier to copy paste the whole thing as opposed to thinking through that impact. Again, same with multimedia. There's a 3-minute limit that students oftentimes will go over. Just because you have a 3-minute limit and you're only having one video, don't just give me a 2-minute, 59-second video. It's shorter is the better. You found this one 3-minute video or 5-minute video or whatever it is. What's the most important 30 seconds of it? 10 seconds, 45 seconds, not just the whole. So if you give me a chunk that seems like it starts here and it just rambles on to your time limit and then you ended it, it's again, not showing that analysis part of it. Give me 40-second quotes from 3 or 4 different sources, or 30-second quotes, as opposed to just the one long chunk. Again, because it's showing that you've taken information and you're working with it. So again, editing tools are your friends. Use the multiple pieces. Not all multimedia is equal, so plan accordingly. Again, I feel like times I've seen ones where it's like, well, I have 3 minutes of video I can use, so here we go. And some of it's just been distracting, didn't add to the project. And so again, I'm sitting there thinking, what am I supposed to be getting out of this video? What's the purpose? Which is distracting from the idea of, oh, okay, we're reinforcing the piece in here. So just because you've done a 2-minute, 59-second video clip does not mean you've benefited necessarily from that same clip that others might have. Be willing to break the model. Your topic might not lend itself to the same order or tabs being used by others. There's one, at least to the best of my knowledge, one school that I'm familiar with in Maine that does every middle schooler participates, and they do a school level competition. And so there's one day where all the kids, they don't have class, they just participate in NHD. And so I go to that one, and it was a couple of years ago, it was Triumphs and Tragedies. And you could see the class format. Every student who came through had the exact same set of tabs going across the top, the same navigation pieces. They had filled out the same worksheet templates as part of their development, which is okay. It just you don't have to stick to that all the time. And the example that stands out is Triumphs and Tragedies. And someone was talking about Dr. Joseph Mengele, the angel of death who did all of the twins experiments in the Nazi concentration camps. And they had their homepage, they had all their information on there, they had their thesis, they had their stuff. And then the very first click was the triumphs of Dr. Joseph Mengele, and talk about how he graduated from medical school and achieved doctor in school. You know, becoming a doctor is hard. And the Nazis awarded him these medals. And I couldn't even like continue in. I just felt like, you've now told me in your thesis about the major point of the things that this man has done. And my very first click is triumphs. And I'm supposed to now be celebrating. It just sets this really bad piece. And so I'm talking with the students, I asked, I said, did you follow a model? Yep, we do this, we do. And I said, you have to be willing to break that model. And I said, and they completely got it. They're like, well, we thought we had to have, you know, in the NHD, right, there's usually like those two components to it, triumph and tragedy. And they thought they had to have both. And I said, well, you don't necessarily have to, right? It makes a lot of sense because it's hard to isolate both triumph and tragedy. But I felt like they had worked really, really, really hard and reached to just do a triumph because they thought it was supposed to be in there. And it really just set a weird tone for the entire rest of the web page. When now after hearing the triumphs of Dr. Mengele, I'm now having to hear the rest, you know, of what he did. So if you are going to cover both sides of that NHD theme, use the appropriate balance and connect to the thesis. Don't feel like you just have to. If your thesis is taking, you know, one side or the other, make that very clear, and make the website that follows in that piece. Don't feel like there's a certain template you have to do. If you have the story that needs to be told a certain way or the approach you're going to do a certain way, then go ahead and take that approach. And so a lot of times it becomes a little bit of just that background noise of, well, tab A is homepage, and then tab B is triumphs, and tab C is tragedies, then tab D is my analysis, then tab E is my bibliography and process paper. That's a generic format that works, but if you want to be successful, be willing to break the mold to tell the story in the way that makes the most sense. Questions? That's my half-hour thing of examples and stories and how I process the websites as I work through them.
Thank you for pointing out the whole idea about, you know, triumph and tragedy, the example you gave with triumph and tragedy. That's something that Lynn O'Hara always points out to, the education director at NHD, is that a lot of students will fall into to this trap that if it's always 50-50, right? So if you have something that is triumph and tragedy, they have to give 50% of their effort to one side and 50% of the other. And, you know, not everything is like that. So, I mean, even if it's 90-10 or something like that. So I do appreciate you mentioning that, breaking that mold and that idea that
I have to jump in. There's something about apparently, because one of my colleagues at the Historical Society has judged for a long time. And when I first started doing the competition, she told me about, she got, I think it might have been another website actually, where the conclusion was he was hurt, but his research led to like cataract surgery or something. And she was just like, I don't know what to do with this. So you're not alone.
And there's if there's things that you can tell, right? Like depending on, I don't think that that's a fun version to tell, but it seems like just sometimes they get in their head. Like I remember another one was about, and I don't think it was the Triumph and Tragedy, or I don't remember what the theme was. Somebody was doing the nuclear bomb in World War II. And I thought they did this really nice job of talking about like the difficult decision, yet it was having to be done, right? Like all this stuff into it. And then there was like this awkward like ending to it. And it's like, and as a result of like 3 million people dying, nuclear energy came to the forefront, and now it's a version of clean energy that's done a lot of progress in our country. And it just all of a sudden then stopped. And I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened? Like they had done in that first part, like I thought there was the great balance, even though we knew the outcome. They were talking about the struggle in making a decision like that. To me, that already indicated the both sides. But then they're like, oh, we got to cover this part. And so there was just like this weird gloss over of all the death. But I would have been okay if that's what they wanted to take. Like my thesis is, while a tragic event, the nuclear bomb sparked it, but it just seemed like they felt they had to put something in. And again, I don't know the structure of that class for that one, for that. Questions. Thank you, Christine. Does anybody have any other questions? Like John said, you get practice at it when he invites you to all the places, and then he gives you a vest. So then when you show up and he's like, I need you to work for a while, then you feel like you can't say no. But that's okay, because he sends me to places when he's doing the judges orientation so that he can be supporting the other judges, so it all works out. Thank you for the reminder about student voice on all pages. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, and that's, again, if you would have somebody proofread those pieces, like that's how I view it, is does this sound like the student in all of the different odds and ends, or not all, and all the different pages and approaches to it. And I don't necessarily have a favorite format. I talked about like navigation tools at the bottom to do the next one. I've seen places where you get the drop down on the top and there's page 5A, B, and C to help, which at times I've seen that done well. You didn't give me one big page, you clearly articulated it. I've also not seen that. I've also seen that not done well. And so I can't say, well, the key to doing it is this. So for me, it's that key to that clarity. Those first reads through, I shouldn't get tripped up on anything. I should feel like you're getting all those requirements in, everything's ready to go. And then you're telling me a story, you're taking me on a path through. And as long as I can clearly navigate, I think they'll be good. Christina, yes, I do like the new rubrics as well. I agree with that.
I think everybody's in agreement with those rubrics. I haven't heard one negative thing yet. We just have a few more minutes. If anybody else has any other questions, it looks like we're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat box there, and saying that this will be very helpful for them in the future.
I have to say, this was kind of echoing what Christine was saying, that I'm a coordinator, I'm familiar with all of the categories, but I haven't personally judged websites nearly as often as I have for the other categories. So I loved getting to have sort of the technical side from Elaine, but then really seeing through your eyes how you walk through the process. So I think that will be really useful for teachers and for future judges potentially as well.
And, as I was watching, Joe, I would echo what Kate is saying, because I've judged websites once many years ago and felt totally overwhelmed in terms of feeling like I was doing a good job judging. And, not only will I think this help students who will go and watch a presentation and have a better sense of what judges are looking for, but I was even thinking I'd love to be able to edit the video of this recording so that I could send out your presentation to website judges, because I'm sure fellow coordinators will agree that websites are one of our most popular categories right now, because you can do it online, there's no cost to it, all of that, but it's the one where I am like begging people to please judge. And oftentimes some of our judges are intimidated by judging websites, and so I think what you shared will also be helpful to share with judges so that they have a better sense of how to kind of look at a website for judging purposes.
Well, good. I'm happy to help. Again, that's the approach I take that I think's had some success into it. And it kind of breaks it down into a little bit more manageable pieces because there are a lot of layers into it. So I just one layer at a time.
Joe, I do have a link to your presentation, your PowerPoint presentation. Is it okay if I share a PDF of that with teachers?
Yep, absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Probably better that way. I can be long-winded, so.
You? No. I see that you've got the Bucky coffee cup as well over there.
My go-to signature water for all webinars.
There you go. Just a couple more minutes. If we have no other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up this session. Joe, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. It really was informative and very helpful, so I do appreciate it. Samantha, do you want to fill us in on our 1 o'clock session?
Definitely. So this afternoon at 1 o'clock, we are going to hear from Rhode Island History Day student Lily Trunzo. Lily built a website in the 2020 contest season on NHD Web Central. She won first place in her category at the Rhode Island State Contest, and then went on to nationals and received the Senior Division Rhode Island Outstanding Project Award. So we're very excited to hear from her. And when we get started with that session, I will share my screen so you can see Lily's website for yourself and kind of get a sense of her work. And then we'll open it up for Q&A from the student's perspective.
I think that's going to be especially helpful because she was there during that first year of Web Central, but we can also talk about, you know, if the stumbling blocks have been addressed or are there things that we haven't thought of yet.
Definitely. We hope to see you there.
Thank you, everyone. See you later on.